Top Garden Design Trends 2025, Sustainable, Mindful and Modern Outdoor Living Ideas. When I walk into the idea of the modern garden, I do not see a boundary at the back of a house, nor a parcel of land to be managed and trimmed. I see an open room, a chamber of air and light that extends the architecture of the home outward, dissolving the distinction between shelter and landscape. In 2025, this vision has become the essence of design. The garden is not an accessory, not a decorative appendix, but a continuation of domestic life itself. Its proportions, its textures, and its systems are conceived as deliberately as walls, corridors, or courtyards. It is a stage where human activity meets ecological presence, where comfort aligns with responsibility, where beauty and function are reconciled into a single narrative. Sustainability has become the first foundation stone of this narrative. No longer can a garden be thought of as a stage set of imported flowers or water-thirsty turf. Instead, it must resonate with the rhythms of its place, employing native species that thrive with minimal intervention, celebrating biodiversity rather than resisting it. Every planting decision is both aesthetic and ecological. A native grass does not simply cover soil, it stabilizes it, shelters insects, and sways in the wind with sculptural grace. A meadow of wildflowers is not a wild indulgence, it is a living canvas of color that also feeds pollinators, reduces irrigation, and restores balance to the environment. Sustainability is no longer hidden in technical reports, it is visible in petals, textures, and living systems. Water management is another architectural gesture. I integrate cisterns and rain chains with the same attention that I give to staircases or window frames. Channels that guide rainwater to storage are composed as elegant lines, features that belong to the garden's geometry. They remind the visitor that water is sacred, to be cherished and reused, not discarded. Composting too becomes part of this design ethos, not relegated to a forgotten corner, but embraced as a cycle of transformation. What is waste becomes nourishment, what is discarded becomes foundation. This is as architectural as any wall, as fundamental as any roof. It is the invisible structure beneath the visible design, the pulse that ensures the garden endures not just for a season, but for generations. Equally significant is the reimagining of the garden as an inhabited room. The walls are hedges or trellises, the ceiling is sky, the floor is stone or timber decking, softened by rugs that withstand weather. The furniture is durable yet inviting, couches and chairs that encourage the same gestures of gathering, lounging and conversing that once belonged solely indoors. I conceive fireplaces, lanterns and lighting systems not as novelties, but as essential architectural devices, extending the comfort of the hearth into the open air. Sliding glass walls vanish so that dining tables inside flow into terraces outside, creating one continuous axis of domestic life. This is not a borrowed metaphor, it is a literal transformation of boundaries, where the threshold becomes a fluid seam rather than a rigid partition. Within this seamless continuum, beauty and utility converge. A true garden in 2025 does not conceal its productivity. Herbs and vegetables are not exiled to the margins, they are woven into the composition. Raised beds stand as sculptural elements, their geometry precise, their function nourishing. Tomatoes climb trellises that also serve as shading screens. Fruit trees mark entrances like living columns, casting shadow while bearing food. Vertical gardens rise on walls, both art and agriculture, while potted plants punctuate decks with fragrance and flavour. This is not decorative excess, it is a philosophy of integration where what sustains the body is also what enriches the eye. Architecture here is edible, not only inhabitable. This blending is reinforced by biophilic design, a principle that guides every choice. To be human is to yearn for connection with the living world, to find comfort in organic forms, natural textures, and elemental rhythms. Thus the pathways curve as rivers do, not as rulers dictate. Stones are placed with intention, yet allowed to remain irregular, evoking the passage of time. Wood retains its grain, its warmth, its imperfections, carrying memory of the tree from which it came. Water is invited in, sometimes as a still reflective pool, sometimes as a murmuring stream whose sound tempers silence with life. Every material, every gesture contributes to an atmosphere of calm, reminding the inhabitant that this is not only design but refuge, not only arrangement but renewal. Technology enters but never disrupts. Its role is to support, to ease, to empower, not to dominate. Irrigation operates unseen, releasing water in exact measure only when soil calls for it. Light responds to the arc of the day, harvesting sun and giving it back at dusk in soft, ambient tones. Applications guide the gardener with knowledge: when to prune, how to guard against pests, how to enrich the soil, while remaining invisible in the experience. The result is a garden of effortless maintenance, where energy efficiency and ecological care are embedded in the very fabric of design. It is architecture imbued with intelligence, but never stripped of soul. Against this precision, a counterpoint arises: the embrace of imperfection. I draw inspiration from wabi-sabi, the Japanese aesthetic that finds beauty in asymmetry, in weathering, in incompleteness. A pathway of stones may not align, yet it tells a story of time and use. A vine may overtake a pergola, yet in its unruly form there is softness, memory, continuity. Furniture may bear the patina of age, yet it feels more welcoming than polished steel. In these gestures lies a deeper truth. Perfection is sterile, but imperfection is alive. A garden designed with this philosophy feels not finished but unfolding, a place where the human and the natural converse freely rather than one dominating the other. Thus, the garden of 2025 emerges as a new architectural type, sustainable in its systems, seamless in its transitions, nourishing in its productivity, restorative in its atmosphere, and humble in its imperfection. It is a sanctuary that sustains both the environment and the soul, a design that honors life in all its forms. Every plant, every stone, every sound of water or whisper of wind is part of a deliberate composition. This is not a decorative exercise, but an act of dwelling more truthfully within the world. It is a blueprint, not only for outdoor living, but for living itself. If the first gesture of a garden in this new age is to extend the architecture of the home outward, then the second gesture is to draw the inhabitant inward into a deeper encounter with nature, atmosphere, and self. The Garden of 2025 is not only a stage for sustainability and functionality, it is also a sanctuary for the senses, a crafted environment that communicates with the human body and spirit in ways that are both immediate and subtle. As I design, I think not only of what can be seen, but of what can be heard, touched, and smelled. The garden becomes multi-sensory architecture, a theatre where light, fragrance, texture, and sound are as deliberately composed as columns and beams. Consider sound: the rustle of tall grasses, the murmur of water cascading along stone, the occasional chime of wind against sculpted metal. These are not incidental occurrences, but intentional layers, each introduced as a compositional element. When I place ornamental grasses along a pathway, I do so knowing that every breeze will animate them into whispers. When I set a fountain into a corner, I calculate the height of the fall, the depth of the pool, the rhythm of its droplets, so that the ear perceives calm rather than clamour. Sound in the garden is architecture for the nervous system. It slows thought, deepens breath, and roots the visitor in the present moment. Touch is another vital layer. The textures of materials invite the hand as much as the eye. Rough stone steps alternate with smooth timber decking. Weathered clay pots are positioned where one must brush against them. Soft moss carpets the bases of trees where children are likely to pause. Leaves themselves provide contrast. Waxy succulents, velvety lamb's ear, feathery ferns. These tactile invitations transform the garden into an experiential composition. One does not simply observe the space. One inhabits it with the body, discovering comfort and curiosity through contact. Scent too is fundamental. I place lavender near seating areas so its fragrance drifts as one rests. Citrus trees perfume patios, with blossoms in spring and fruit in summer. Rosemary edges a path, releasing its aroma underfoot. These decisions are not random plantings, they are architectural strategies. Fragrance is memory, and when woven into the design, it imprints the garden upon the inhabitant's mind. The scent of herbs during an evening meal, the sweetness of jasmine carried on night air, these are the invisible structures that shape how the garden is remembered and cherished. Light is perhaps the most transformative of all. In daylight, it pours freely, illuminating textures, shifting shadows across surfaces, and animating leaves with constant variation. But as the sun sets, the role of designed illumination begins. I do not flood a garden with light, I sculpt it. Pathways are traced with low glows, not to dazzle but to guide. Seating areas are framed in pools of warm illumination, creating intimacy beneath the vastness of the sky. Water features reflect gentle points of light, doubling their shimmer. Trees are lit from below, their canopies revealed as living sculptures against the night. Light becomes not utility but atmosphere, orchestrating how the garden shifts from day into evening, how it hosts conversation, solitude, or celebration beneath the stars. In this orchestration, the garden begins to transcend its role as backdrop and instead becomes an instrument for mindfulness. When designed with intention, it encourages slowness, presence, and reflection. A bench facing east invites the ritual of sunrise. A secluded alcove beneath a pergola offers retreat for meditation or reading. A circular gathering space under open sky frames starlight for contemplation. These are not arbitrary features, but deliberate invitations to inhabit time differently. The garden is a space where technology recedes, where the senses expand, where the mind is drawn into harmony with the rhythms of nature. It is architecture as sanctuary. At the same time, this sanctuary remains social. The garden is not only a solitary retreat, but also a communal stage. I design spaces for dining that accommodate both intimate meals and larger gatherings, terraces that transform from family breakfasts to evening feasts with friends. Fire pits and outdoor fireplaces create focal points, drawing groups together around warmth and light. Lounges under pergolas become stages for conversation, music, and storytelling. The garden of 2025 balances solitude and community, offering moments of introspection and opportunities for shared experience with equal grace. It is flexible architecture, able to shift tone according to the needs of its inhabitants. One of the defining features of this flexibility is the deliberate blurring of tradition and innovation. While I embrace natural materials and organic forms, I also integrate contemporary design techniques. A rustic stone path may lead to a minimalist glass pavilion. A wooden trellis supporting climbing vines may be engineered with precision joints and sustainable timber technologies. Solar panels may be disguised as roofing tiles upon a pergola, their modern function hidden within traditional form. This coexistence is central. The garden is not a nostalgic reconstruction of the past, nor a sterile futuristic laboratory. It is a dialogue between heritage and progress, where every choice acknowledges both lineage and possibility. Wabi-sabi continues to guide this dialogue. The imperfect, the weathered, the asymmetrical, all find place in the composition. A wooden bench left to grey naturally in sun and rain becomes more welcoming with age. A pathway of uneven stones feels alive as though grown from the earth itself. A wall covered in creeping ivy softens rigid geometry, reminding us that time participates in design. To embrace imperfection is to embrace truth, to allow architecture to evolve rather than insist upon static perfection. The garden thus becomes not a finished product but a living process, an unfinished composition always in conversation with change. Technology, though subtle, enriches this process further. Smart irrigation ensures plants receive exactly what they need, no more, no less. Solar-powered lighting adapts to seasonal changes in daylight. App-based guidance helps inhabitants learn about the species they live among, reminding them when to harvest, prune, or protect. But the technology remains hidden, never obtrusive. Its presence is felt only in the ease and resilience of the garden, not in visible screens or machines. It is architecture supported by intelligence, but experienced as pure atmosphere. The essence of this second gesture of the garden is to engage all dimensions of human experience. It is no longer enough for a garden to look beautiful. It must feel alive, must breathe with the inhabitant, must respond to presence. It must heal and inspire. Every stone, every plant, every shaft of light and ripple of water is a note in a symphony that restores balance to modern life. In an era of constant speed, noise, and digital distraction, the garden offers its opposite: slowness, quiet, and embodied presence. It becomes a place where architecture dissolves into atmosphere, where the act of stepping outside becomes the act of stepping inward. This is the garden as designed for 2025, not static ornament, not casual landscaping, but multi-sensory, mindful, communal, and restorative architecture, where every choice of material, form, and placement speaks to the body, the spirit, and the world that sustains them. As the vision of the garden unfolds further, its third movement is one of synthesis, where every principle of sustainability, every gesture towards sensory immersion, and every architectural device coalesce into a complete philosophy of dwelling. In 2025, the garden has transcended the boundaries of trend. It has become a manifesto, a declaration of how human beings can inhabit the earth responsibly while cultivating beauty, comfort, and meaning. This final gesture is about integration, not merely blending indoors with outdoors, nor simply juxtaposing tradition and innovation, but weaving them into a coherent living architecture that evolves alongside its inhabitants. In this synthesis, the garden assumes the role of storyteller. Each material, each form, each layer of growth speaks of time, place, and intention. A pathway of uneven stone recounts the patience of geological processes, the weathering of centuries distilled into tactile presence. A stand of native trees narrates the resilience of local ecosystems, adapting, flourishing, sheltering countless forms of life. Furniture weathered by sun and rain speaks of gatherings past, of human presence inscribed upon its surface. The garden is no longer a static canvas of design, it is a living chronicle, its story co-authored by climate, by plants, by people, by time itself. To design such a space is not to freeze it in perfection, but to set its story in motion. Central to this narrative is resilience. In the face of shifting climates, changing rainfall patterns, and new ecological challenges, the garden of 2025 is conceived as adaptable architecture. Plantings are selected for their endurance as much as their beauty. Ground covers resist drought, perennials return reliably year after year, and systems of water collection and storage respond flexibly to scarcity and abundance alike. Structures are designed to weather gracefully rather than crumble, to gain patina, not to decay. Pergolas that shelter from sun today may one day serve as trellises for shade plants, adjusting the microclimate as the environment shifts. Resilience is built into the DNA of design, ensuring that the garden remains not only beautiful, but viable, generation after generation. This resilience extends into the human dimension as well. The garden is no longer only a space of leisure, it is a contributor to well-being. It nourishes the body through edible landscapes, supplying herbs, fruits, and vegetables within steps of the kitchen. It nurtures the mind through spaces for rest, contemplation, and creative activity. It strengthens community by drawing families and friends together, giving them a shared environment where memory and ritual can flourish. To design a garden in 2025 is to design for health, for connection, for emotional restoration. It is architecture as medicine, environment as therapy, and landscape as teacher. The role of ritual cannot be overlooked. In modern life, we often lose the anchor of natural cycles, disconnected from the rising of the sun, the phases of the moon, the turn of the seasons. The garden restores this connection. A terrace oriented toward the east becomes a site for sunrise rituals. A grove of trees aligns with the path of afternoon light, offering shade that shifts with the seasons. A reflective pool mirrors the moon, marking the passage of lunar time. These are not arbitrary placements, but deliberate alignments that reconnect inhabitants with the greater rhythms of existence. Through ritual, the garden reawakens the ancient dialogue between architecture and cosmos. Equally important is the invitation to creativity. The garden is never complete, it is a living workshop. Inhabitants may add to it, rearrange it, cultivate new species, shape its future with their own hands. Raised beds invite experimentation in food production. Open walls and trellises invite vines to be trained in new directions. Containers can be shifted, colours reimagined, scents rotated with the seasons. The garden is not a fixed artifact delivered by the architect, but a canvas for continual co-creation between designer and dweller. This is its true beauty. It does not imprison its inhabitants in a final design, but empowers them to participate in its unfolding. And yet, for all its adaptability, the garden retains coherence through its guiding philosophy. Every gesture, no matter how spontaneous, is framed within the architecture of sustainability, mindfulness, and biophilic connection. The wildness of a vine is allowed, but it is anchored in a trellis conceived with intent. The play of asymmetry is celebrated, but always within a structure that maintains balance. The randomness of seasonal bloom is anticipated, guided, and given context by the framework of design. This is the paradox of the garden, a space both structured and free, both designed and untamed, both permanent and ephemeral. It is this paradox that makes it endlessly alive. Technology continues to support this vision quietly in the background. Automated systems respond to weather conditions, ensuring irrigation is efficient and precise. Solar energy harvested from unobtrusive panels sustains lighting and water features. Apps provide guidance, but more importantly, they provide learning, deepening the inhabitants' understanding of the living systems they engage with daily. The technology never eclipses the human experience, it amplifies it. The garden remains a realm of earth and sky, not of screens and data, but the intelligence of modern systems ensures its longevity and accessibility. This is design that embraces progress without sacrificing essence. The culmination of all these elements, sustainability, resilience, multisensory immersion, imperfection, ritual and technology, produces a new typology of architecture. The garden of 2025 is not separate from the home, nor is it merely attached to it. It is interwoven, inseparable, codependent. The garden sustains the home's inhabitants physically and emotionally, while the home gives structure and access to the garden's gifts. Together they form a single continuum, an architecture of living that acknowledges the truth of our place within the larger ecology of the planet. To dwell in such a space is to recognize that human life does not stand apart from nature, but is always embedded within it. Thus, the final gesture of the garden is reconciliation. It reconciles human comfort with environmental care, tradition with innovation, imperfection with elegance, solitude with community. It shows us that architecture need not dominate the land, but can converse with it. It reminds us that design is not only about surfaces and structures, but about systems, processes, and experiences. It proves that beauty is not at odds with responsibility, but born from it. The garden becomes both mirror and model, a reflection of the values of its time and a model for how to live more harmoniously with the earth. When I step back and consider this architecture, I see not only pathways, walls and plants, but a vision of life itself. I see an environment where every choice carries meaning, where every detail participates in a greater harmony. The garden of 2025 is not a retreat from the world. It is inhabiting it more fully, more honestly, and more beautifully. It is a living proof that architecture does not end at the edge of a roof, nor at the line of a property, but extends into the soil, into the air, into the future. This is the gardener's manifesto, the architecture of a new relationship between human and earth, dynamic, enduring, and profoundly alive.